the world didn't end with a bang like everyone thought it would. Nah, it ended with a whole lot of moaning, shuffling feet, and the smell of death creeping through every street corner in America. Nobody saw it coming, not really. Sure, there were rumors on the internet, some weird footage from overseas, but folks just kept scrolling, kept living their lives like tomorrow was guaranteed. Marcus Webb learned real quick that tomorrow wasn't promised to nobody when he watched his neighbor, old Mr. Patterson, try to take a bite out of the mailman on a Tuesday morning in suburban Detroit. That was 3 weeks ago, and Marcus was still alive, which was more than he could say for about 90% of the people he used to know. Marcus crouched behind an overturned delivery truck on Woodward Avenue, his breath coming out in short bursts that fogged up in the cold October air. The city was a graveyard now, all broken windows and abandoned cars, trash blowing through the streets like tumbleweeds in some messed-up Western movie. He gripped the aluminum baseball bat tighter, the same one he used to hit homers back in high school before life got complicated. Now it was caked with dried blood and other stuff he tried not to think about too hard. About 30 feet ahead, a group of those things shambled past an old pharmacy, their movements jerky and wrong, like puppets with tangled strings. Marcus counted 6 of them, which wasn't great but wasn't terrible either. He'd dealt with worse. The plan was simple: get to the old fire station on the east side where he'd heard on a crackling radio broadcast that survivors were holing up. The broadcast was 2 days old, and for all Marcus knew, everyone there was already dead or turned, but it was better than being alone. Being alone in this new world was a death sentence, and Marcus Webb wasn't ready to cash out just yet. He waited until the dead moved past, their groans fading into the background noise of this nightmare city, then made his move. He stayed low, moving from car to car, his sneakers barely making a sound on the cracked asphalt. Every shadow looked like a threat now, every sound made his heart jump into his throat. 3 blocks away, in what used to be a fancy loft apartment building, Brooklyn Hayes was having a really bad day. Then again, every day was bad now, but this one took the cake. She'd been stuck on the 7th floor for the past week after a horde of those rotting freaks trapped her during a supply run gone sideways. Brooklyn wasn't the type to panic though. Before everything went to hell, she'd been a rock climbing instructor and weekend prepper, much to her friends' amusement. They weren't laughing now. Well, they weren't doing anything now except maybe trying to eat people. She tried not to think about that too much. Brooklyn had managed to secure her floor pretty well. She'd blockaded the stairwell with furniture, broken the elevator so nothing could ride up, and set up some noise traps that would alert her if anything got too close. The problem was food. She'd run through her supplies faster than expected, and the canned goods she'd scavenged from neighboring apartments were down to the dregs. Today was the day she had to make a move or starve. She checked her gear for the 10th time, climbing rope, carabiners, a wicked hunting knife her dad gave her before he passed, a small backpack, and a handgun with exactly 7 bullets. 7 chances to not screw up. Her plan was absolutely nuts, which is probably why it might actually work. The building next door was only about 15 feet away, and she'd spotted what looked like an untouched convenience store on the ground level. If she could rappel down from her window, swing over to the next building, break in through a window, clear it out, grab supplies, and get back before dark, she might just make it. Might being the key word. Brooklyn took a deep breath, tied off her rope to the radiator she'd reinforced with pipe and duct tape, and said a little prayer to whatever was still listening. Then she went out the window. The rope held, thank God. Brooklyn walked backward down the side of the building, her muscles remembering the movements even though her brain was screaming that this was crazy. The dead ones below caught on pretty quick. She could hear them getting excited, that awful moaning sound picking up like some twisted choir. Don't look down, she told herself. Looking down would make it real, make her freeze up, and freezing up meant falling, and falling meant becoming one of those things. She pushed off the wall, swinging in a wide arc toward the next building. The wind caught her, pushing her further than expected, and for a heart-stopping second, she thought she was gonna miss it completely. Her hand shot out, grabbing a rusted fire escape railing, her shoulder screaming in protest. But she held on. She always held on. Meanwhile, about 40 miles west in what used to be the quiet suburb of Plymouth, Tommy Rodriguez and his little sister Angela were learning that quiet didn't exist anymore. Tommy was 17, still had acne, still stressed about the SATs he'd never end up taking. Angela was 9 and still asked when Mom was coming back, even though they'd both seen Mom turn into one of those monsters with their own eyes. Dad had done what needed to be done, then walked out into the backyard and put the gun to his own head before Tommy could stop him. That was week 1. Now they were in week 3, and Tommy had grown up real fast. They'd been living in the crawlspace under the Peterson house across the street from their own. The Petersons had evacuated early on, probably dead in some highway pileup like so many others who thought running was the answer. The crawlspace was cramped, dark, and smelled like mold, but it was safe. Tommy had been doing supply runs at night when the dead ones seemed slower, less active. He'd hit up the nearby houses, grabbing whatever canned food, water, and supplies he could carry. Angela stayed behind with strict instructions: don't make noise, don't come out for nobody, and if Tommy didn't come back by sunrise, head north to where they'd heard the military was setting up safe zones. Tonight felt different though. Tommy could feel it in his gut, that weird sixth sense he'd developed for when things were about to go sideways. The street was too quiet, no moaning, no shuffling. Just silence. That scared him more than the noise did. He'd just cleared the Rodriguez place, his own home that didn't feel like home anymore, grabbing some family photos and Angela's stuffed rabbit she'd been crying about. He was heading back when he saw them. Not the dead ones. People. Living, breathing people in tactical gear, carrying serious firepower, moving house to house in formation. Tommy's first instinct was relief. Help. Finally. But something stopped him from calling out. Maybe it was the way they moved, efficient and cold. Maybe it was the screaming he heard coming from 2 streets over, then the sudden silence. Maybe it was the way one of them casually shot a dead one in the head, then kept walking without even checking if it was actually dead or just some scared survivor. Tommy melted back into the shadows, his heart pounding. Not all living people were good people anymore. He'd learned that lesson when Mr. Chin from the corner store tried to steal his supplies at knife point last week. Tommy had gotten away, but barely. He made it back to the crawlspace, sliding through the gap he'd loosened in the foundation lattice. Angela rushed into his arms, and he held her tight, whispering that everything was okay even though it absolutely wasn't. He told her about the armed men, and her eyes went wide with fear. They'd heard stories on the battery-powered radio before it died. Stories about groups taking over neighborhoods, hoarding supplies, killing anyone who wasn't useful. Stories about the government doing experiments, trying to find immune people. Stories about safe zones that were just traps. Tommy didn't know what was true anymore, but he knew they couldn't stay here. Those men were searching every house, and eventually, they'd search this one. Back in Detroit, Marcus had made it another 8 blocks before his luck ran out. He'd gotten cocky, took a shortcut through an alley, and walked right into a nightmare. The alley was packed with them, had to be at least 20 or 30 of those rotting corpses just milling around like they were waiting for a bus. They turned as one when they saw him, that awful recognition sparking in their dead eyes. Marcus didn't think, just ran. His legs pumped hard, the bat clanging against a dumpster as he vaulted over a chain-link fence. He could hear them behind him, faster than they should be, driven by that hunger that never quit. He burst out onto a main street, nearly getting grabbed by another group he hadn't seen. This was bad. This was really bad. He was surrounded, and the fire station was still 6 blocks away. Marcus saw an old church across the street, door hanging open like an invitation. He didn't have a choice. He sprinted for it, feeling cold fingers brush his jacket, hearing the snap of teeth way too close to his ear. He hit the church doors hard, stumbling inside, then turned and threw his weight against them. They didn't close all the way. Something was blocking them. A body, half decomposed, wedged in the doorframe. Marcus kicked it, pushed it, finally got the doors shut just as the horde slammed against them. The church was dark, smelled like old incense and death. Marcus could hear them outside, pounding, scraping, moaning. He leaned against the door, adding his weight to the barricade, trying to catch his breath. His eyes adjusted to the darkness, and that's when he saw he wasn't alone. There were people here, maybe a dozen of them, huddled in the pews. They stared at him with hollow eyes, and not one of them moved to help him. A woman in the front pew spoke, her voice hoarse. "You brought them here. You led them right to us." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to say he was sorry, but the look in their eyes stopped him. These weren't people anymore, not really. Fear had hollowed them out, turned them into ghosts. An older man, had to be 60 at least, stood up from the back. He was different from the others, had some life still in his eyes. "Door's gonna hold for now," he said, walking down the aisle toward Marcus. "Name's Calvin Price. You got a name, or should I just call you Trouble?" Marcus would have laughed if the situation wasn't so messed up. "Marcus Webb. I'm heading to the fire station on East Side. Heard there's survivors there." Calvin nodded slowly. "Heard the same. Also heard it might be a trap. Raiders set up fake safe zones, lure people in, take their stuff. Kill them if they're lucky." The thought hadn't occurred to Marcus, and his stomach dropped. "So what, we just stay here? Wait to die?" Calvin shrugged. "Some of these folks, that's exactly what they're planning to do. Given up. Me? I'm too stubborn to die in a church. Been avoiding these places my whole life, not about to let one be my grave." Despite everything, Marcus smiled. He liked Calvin. "You got a plan?" Calvin pulled out a crumpled map from his jacket. "Been mapping the tunnels under the city. Old maintenance passages, sewers, stuff most folks forgot about. There's an entrance in the basement here. Leads all the way across town, comes up near the river. From there, we can get to the fire station above ground, scope it out safely." Marcus looked at the people in the pews, then back at Calvin. "What about them?" Calvin's expression hardened. "Offered to take them with me. They said no. Said God would protect them. I told them God helps those who help themselves, but they didn't want to hear it." The pounding on the doors was getting worse. Something was gonna give soon. Marcus made his decision. "Let's go. Show me this tunnel." Calvin grinned, and for a second, Marcus could see the young man he used to be. "Now you're talking. Come on, before those things break through." They moved quickly to the back of the church, past the people who watched them go with empty eyes. Marcus felt bad leaving them, but Calvin was right. You couldn't save people who didn't want to be saved. The basement was accessed through a door behind the altar, steps leading down into darkness. Calvin had a flashlight, good batteries too. They descended into the cool, damp air, and Marcus could hear the church door finally give way above them, screams echoing down the stairs. He wanted to go back, wanted to help, but Calvin grabbed his arm. "They made their choice. We make ours. That's how it is now." The tunnels were everything Marcus feared they'd be. Cramped, wet, pitch black except for Calvin's flashlight beam, and filled with sounds he couldn't identify. Water dripped somewhere. Things scurried in the darkness. Every shadow looked like death waiting to grab them. But there were no dead ones down here, at least not yet. Calvin navigated like he'd done this 100 times, taking lefts and rights that all looked the same to Marcus. They talked as they walked, trading stories. Calvin had been a city maintenance worker for 30 years, knew Detroit's guts better than its face. When things went bad, he'd gone underground, literally. been surviving down here, coming up only when necessary. Above ground, Brooklyn had made it into the convenience store and immediately regretted every decision that led her there. The place wasn't empty. 3 of those things were inside, and they'd noticed her the second she broke the window. Brooklyn pulled her knife, not wanting to waste bullets. The first one came at her fast, and she sidestepped, bringing the blade up into its skull from under the jaw. It dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The second one grabbed her backpack, and she shrugged out of it, spinning low and sweeping its legs. It went down, and she stomped on its head until it stopped moving. The third one was small, had been a kid once, and Brooklyn hesitated. That hesitation almost got her killed. It lunged, teeth snapping, and Brooklyn fell backward into a shelf of motor oil. Bottles crashed down around them, slippery liquid going everywhere. Brooklyn couldn't get her footing, couldn't get leverage. The thing was on top of her, so close she could smell the rot, see the maggots crawling in its eye sockets. She got her forearm up under its chin, holding those snapping teeth back, her other hand scrabbling for her knife. Her fingers closed around the handle, and she drove it into the thing's temple. It went limp, and Brooklyn shoved it off her, breathing hard, covered in oil and blood and worse. She lay there for a second, staring at the ceiling tiles, some still showing old water stains from before the world ended. Before everything ended. Brooklyn wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to give up. But she didn't. She got up, wiped the knife on her jeans, and started grabbing supplies. Canned soup, bottled water, beef jerky, batteries, first aid supplies. She packed her bag methodically, her hands shaking just a little. The climb back up was gonna suck, but she'd made it this far. No point in quitting now. Outside, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in colors too beautiful for a dead world. Brooklyn could see them gathering below, drawn by the noise she'd made. Dozens of them now, maybe more. Going back the way she came wasn't an option. She looked around the store, thinking fast. The roof. She could get to the roof, cross over to the next building, find another way down. It wasn't a great plan, but it was better than nothing. She found the access ladder in the back room, climbed up, and pushed through the roof hatch. The city spread out before her, a cemetery of steel and concrete, fires burning in the distance where survivors or raiders or who knows what made their stands. Brooklyn moved across the rooftop, jumping the small gaps between buildings, her rock climbing skills paying off big time. She was 3 buildings away from her loft when she saw them. People. Real, living people on a rooftop 2 blocks north. They had a whole setup going, garden beds, solar panels, rain collectors. They'd built something that looked almost like civilization. Brooklyn felt hope for the first time in weeks, real hope. She waved her arms, trying to get their attention. One of them spotted her, pointed. They were talking, discussing. Then one raised a rifle. Brooklyn dove flat as the shot rang out, the bullet sparking off the roof where she'd been standing. What the hell? She scrambled backward, confusion and fear mixing into a cocktail of adrenaline. Another shot, closer this time. They weren't warning shots. They were trying to kill her. Brooklyn ran, jumping another gap, her bag bouncing hard against her back. Why were they shooting? She didn't understand. She wasn't infected. She wasn't a threat. Another shot grazed her leg, pain flaring hot and immediate. Brooklyn stumbled but kept moving. The message was clear, they didn't want neighbors. Didn't want competition for resources. Didn't want witnesses to whatever they were doing up there. She made it back to her building, practically falling through the window, her leg bleeding but not too bad. The bullet had just grazed her. Lucky. She was getting real tired of having to be lucky. Brooklyn patched herself up with supplies from her new stash, her hands steadier now that she was back in her safe space. But it wasn't really safe anymore, was it? Those people knew she was here now. What if they decided to come finish the job? What if they wanted her supplies? Brooklyn looked at her gear, her meager food, her 7 bullets. 6 now, she corrected herself. She'd used one without even realizing it during the store fight. No, wait, still 7. Small miracles. Out in Plymouth, Tommy and Angela were on the move. They'd waited until full dark, then slipped out of the crawlspace while the armed men were searching houses 2 streets over. Tommy had a destination in mind, the old Plymouth High School. Before the internet went down, he'd seen posts on a survivor forum about a group of teenagers fortifying the school, creating a safe zone for kids who'd lost their families. It might be nothing, might be everyone already dead, but it was worth checking out. Angela held his hand tight as they moved through backyards, avoiding the streets where those things wandered and the armed men patrolled. They were crossing through the Johnsons' yard when they heard it. Crying. Quiet, muffled, coming from the garden shed. Tommy froze, every instinct screaming to keep moving. Don't investigate, it's not your problem. But Angela tugged his hand, her eyes pleading. She'd always been the compassionate one, even now. Tommy cursed under his breath and moved toward the shed. He opened the door slowly, knife ready. Inside, huddled behind a lawnmower, was a kid. Couldn't be more than 6, covered in dirt, tears streaking his face. "Hey," Tommy whispered. "Hey, it's okay. We're not gonna hurt you." The kid just stared, eyes wide with terror. Angela pushed past Tommy, going straight to the boy with that fearless kindness only kids seem to have anymore. "I'm Angela. What's your name?" The boy's lips trembled. "Jay Jackson. Those men took my dad. They took him and they said he failed the test." Tommy's blood ran cold. "Test? What test?" Jackson kept talking, words tumbling out. "They're testing everyone. Sticking them with needles. If you pass, they take you to the trucks. If you fail." He started crying harder. Tommy pulled both kids close, his mind racing. This was bigger than raiders. This was organized, official even. Maybe government, maybe military, maybe some corporation that survived. Didn't matter who. What mattered was they were taking people, and Tommy had a real bad feeling about where they were taking them. "Jackson, you're coming with us. We're gonna keep you safe, okay?" The boy nodded, and just like that, Tommy's responsibility doubled. 3 kids now, trying to survive in a world that wanted them dead or worse. They moved faster now, urgency pushing them forward. The high school was only a mile away, but it might as well have been 100 with those men searching and the dead ones shambling around every corner. They cut through the old shopping center, past stores that had been looted bare, past bodies that had been there so long they were just skeletons and clothes. Angela started to cry quietly, and Tommy let her. Crying was human. Crying meant you weren't one of those things, weren't one of the cold-eyed survivors who'd forgotten what it meant to feel. The high school loomed ahead, and Tommy's heart sank. The place looked dead. Windows broken, doors hanging open, no lights, no signs of life. They'd come all this way for nothing. But then he saw it. Smoke. Not the black smoke of destruction, but the gray smoke of a controlled fire. Someone was burning wood for warmth or cooking. Someone was alive. Tommy led the kids toward the back of the school, where the smoke was coming from. They entered through the old gym entrance, and immediately, flashlights blinded them. "Don't move," a voice commanded. Young, female, scared but trying to sound tough. Tommy raised his hands, squinting against the light. "We're not infected. We're just kids. We heard there were survivors here." The flashlights lowered, and Tommy could see them now. 5 teenagers, ranging from maybe 14 to 18, armed with baseball bats, hockey sticks, and one had a bow with arrows. The girl who'd spoken stepped forward. She was tall, athletic build, with her hair tied back. "I'm Jasmine Cooper. This is our place. You want to stay, you work. You pull your weight. And we test you first. There was that word again. Test. Tommy tensed. What kind of test? Jasmine's expression softened a little. Relax. Not whatever you're thinking. We just need to make sure you're not bit, not scratched. Need to see you're actually alive and not about to turn. We've had problems before. That made sense. That was smart even. Tommy nodded. Okay. Test us. They submitted to the examination, which was thorough but respectful. Clean bills of health for all three of them. Jasmine seemed satisfied. All right. Welcome to New Plymouth High. We've got about 20 kids here, ranging from 7 to 18. We grow food, collect rain, scavenge supplies. Everyone contributes. Everyone survives. Deal? Tommy felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Real, genuine relief. Deal. They were led into the school proper, which was way more organized than Tommy expected. The kids had blocked off most of the building, focusing on securing and maintaining just one wing. They had sleeping areas set up in classrooms, a common area in the old cafeteria, even a classroom dedicated to food storage and preparation. It was rough, it was basic, but it was civilization. Angela and Jackson were immediately adopted by a group of younger kids, and Tommy watched his sister smile for the first time since everything went to hell. Maybe they'd be okay. Maybe they'd actually make it. But that night, as Tommy lay on a sleeping bag in what used to be the math classroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was temporary. Those armed men were still out there, still searching, still testing. And eventually, they'd come to the school. He'd have to be ready. They'd all have to be ready. Back in Detroit's tunnels, Marcus and Calvin had been walking for over an hour when they heard it. Splashing. Behind them. Getting closer. Calvin's flashlight beam swung around, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. They weren't alone down here. 3 of those things, soaked and rotting, were wading through the tunnel water toward them. How the hell did they get down here? Calvin grabbed Marcus's arm. Run. The junction's just ahead. We can lose them there. They ran, their own splashing echoing off the tunnel walls, the moaning behind them getting louder. The junction was a mess of intersecting tunnels, and Calvin took a hard right, then a left, then another right. Marcus tried to keep track but gave up. He just focused on keeping pace with the older man who was surprisingly fast. They emerged into a larger chamber, some kind of old maintenance hub, and Calvin immediately started climbing a ladder bolted to the wall. Up! Go! Marcus didn't argue. He climbed, his bat awkward in one hand, pulling himself up rung by rung. Below, the dead ones entered the chamber, tilting their heads up in that creepy way they did, tracking the movement. The ladder led to another level of tunnels, these ones dry and filled with old pipes. Calvin led them down a passage barely wide enough for Marcus's shoulders, emerging finally into a basement that smelled like mildew and old beer. Where are we? Marcus asked, breathing hard. Calvin grinned. Old brewery. Been out of business for 10 years. We're about 2 blocks from the river now. Fire station's just across. They made their way upstairs, and Marcus could see daylight through boarded windows. Morning had come while they were underground. They peeked through gaps in the boards, scouting the area. The streets were relatively clear, just a few of those things wandering aimlessly. The fire station was visible across an intersection, and it looked secure. Real secure. Too secure maybe. The windows were professionally barricaded, not the haphazard stuff survivors usually did. There were guards on the roof, armed with actual rifles. And there were trucks parked outside, military-style vehicles. Marcus and Calvin exchanged looks. That's not a survivor camp, Marcus said quietly. That's a military operation. Calvin nodded. Question is, are they the good guys or the bad guys? As if in answer, they watched as a group of survivors approached the fire station, hands raised, clearly asking for help. The guards let them get close, then started shouting orders. The survivors were forced to their knees, hands behind their heads. Soldiers came out, zip-tied them, started searching them. One of the survivors, a woman, started resisting, trying to get away. A soldier hit her with the butt of his rifle, and she went down hard. They dragged her and the others into the fire station. None of them came back out. Bad guys, Calvin said flatly. Definitely bad guys. Marcus felt anger mixing with his fear. This was wrong. Those were people asking for help, and they'd been taken prisoner. For what? Those tests Tommy and Jackson had heard about? Experiments? Slave labor? Nothing good, that was for sure. We gotta do something, Marcus said, surprising himself. Calvin looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Do something? Kid, there's 2 of us and at least a dozen of them, armed to the teeth. We do something, we die. That's all that happens. Marcus knew he was right. Knew it was suicide. But he couldn't shake the image of that woman getting hit, getting dragged inside. He'd spent 3 weeks running, hiding, surviving. Maybe it was time to actually do something that mattered. You got any more of those tunnels that lead under that fire station? Marcus asked. Calvin's eyes widened, then a slow smile spread across his face. You're crazy. Completely nuts. He paused. Yeah, I got a tunnel. Comes up right in their basement. Hasn't been used in probably 20 years, so they might not even know about it. They planned it out. Wait until nightfall. Use the tunnel to get inside. Free whoever was being held. Get out before the soldiers knew what hit them. It was insane. It was reckless. It was probably going to get them killed. But for the first time since the world ended, Marcus felt like he was doing something right. They spent the day preparing, finding supplies in the old brewery. Marcus found a tire iron to supplement his bat. Calvin grabbed a crowbar and a bottle that they could turn into a Molotov cocktail if needed. They ate a cold meal of canned beans and prepared themselves for what might be their last night alive. As the sun set over the dead city, painting the ruins in shades of orange and red, different survivors across the Detroit area were making their own preparations. Brooklyn was packing up her loft, deciding to risk moving locations after the incident with the hostile survivors. She'd head east, maybe try to find a way out of the city entirely. Tommy was helping reinforce the high school's defenses, teaching the other kids how to set traps and create noise diversions. Angela and Jackson were in the garden, watering the small plants that represented hope for a future. Jasmine was on watch, scanning the horizon for threats, her bow ready. And in the tunnels beneath the fire station, Marcus and Calvin were making their way toward whatever waited for them in the darkness. The tunnel was even worse than the others, filled with roots and debris and water that came up to their knees. But they pushed forward, driven by purpose. The access point was an old maintenance hatch, rusted but still functional. Calvin worked it carefully, quietly, until it gave way with a soft groan. They emerged into a dark basement, listening hard for any sign they'd been heard. The basement was full of supplies. Medical equipment, food, weapons, and something else. Cages. Actual cages with people in them. Marcus counted at least a dozen prisoners, all looking weak, sick, defeated. The woman from earlier was there, blood on her face from where she'd been hit. When she saw Marcus and Calvin, her eyes went wide. Marcus put a finger to his lips, signaling quiet. They moved between the cages, using Calvin's crowbar to break the locks as silently as possible. "Who are you?" the woman whispered. "Why are you helping us?" Marcus met her eyes. "Because someone should. Because it's right. That good enough?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. They got all the cages open, freed maybe 15 people total. Now came the hard part. Getting them out. They couldn't go back through the tunnel, not with this many people. They'd have to fight their way out. Calvin distributed weapons from the supply cache. Nothing fancy, but enough. Batons, a couple of handguns with limited ammo, knives. Marcus laid out the plan. They'd go up fast and hard, overwhelm the guards before they could organize a response, get to the vehicles outside, and drive like hell. It wasn't a great plan, but it was the only plan. The freed prisoners, despite being weak, had fire in their eyes now. They'd been given up for dead, and now they had a chance. That was worth fighting for. They moved to the stairs, Marcus in the lead with his bat, Calvin right behind him. On Marcus's signal, they charged. The first floor was chaos. Soldiers scrambled, not expecting an attack from inside. Marcus swung his bat, connecting with a guard's knee, dropping him. Calvin was right there, disarming him, tossing his rifle to one of the freed prisoners. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the confined space. Someone was screaming. People were running. Marcus just kept moving forward, fighting on pure instinct. They reached the main bay where the trucks were parked. More soldiers, more shooting. One of the freed prisoners went down, blood spreading across his chest. Another took a round to the shoulder but kept moving. They piled into the largest truck, Marcus jumping into the driver's seat. He'd never driven anything this big before, but how hard could it be? Turns out, pretty hard, but adrenaline and desperation were great motivators. He got the engine started, threw it into gear, and punched the gas. The truck crashed through the fire station doors, soldiers diving out of the way, bullets pinging off the armor. They were out, they were moving, and somehow, miraculously, most of them were alive. Calvin was laughing, actually laughing, the crazy sound of someone who'd just cheated death and couldn't quite believe it. "Where to, boss?" he asked Marcus. Marcus realized he had no idea. He was driving a stolen military truck full of freed prisoners through a city full of zombies with no destination in mind. He started laughing too, because what else could you do? "North," he finally said. "I heard there's safe zones up north. Real ones, not traps. Might as well find out if that's true." In the back of the truck, the freed prisoners were tending to their wounded, sharing water, just holding each other and crying with relief. The woman Marcus had seen get hit made her way to the cab. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'm Rachel Martinez. You saved our lives." Marcus shook his head. "Just did what needed doing." "What were they holding you for?" "Those tests?" Rachel's expression darkened. "They were looking for immune people. People who'd been bitten but didn't turn. They'd expose us to the infected on purpose, see who survived. Most didn't. The ones who did, they took them somewhere else. I don't know where. Somewhere worse." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. This was systematic. Organized. This wasn't just one group of bad soldiers. This was maybe official policy, government sanctioned. How many other sites like that fire station were out there? How many people were being used as lab rats? The fight wasn't just against the dead anymore. It was against the living too, the ones who saw the end of the world as an opportunity instead of a tragedy. They drove through the night, navigating abandoned highways, going around wrecks and hordes of the dead. The truck's fuel gauge was dropping steadily, and Marcus knew they'd have to stop eventually. As dawn broke on their fourth week in the apocalypse, they found themselves in rural Michigan, farmland stretching out on both sides of the road. It looked almost peaceful if you didn't look too close at the abandoned houses and crashed cars. Calvin spotted it first. A farm that looked intact, even had smoke coming from the chimney. Signs of life. They approached carefully, weapons ready, but the reception was different than expected. A man and woman came out, older couple, armed but not hostile. "You folks look like you've had a rough night," the man said. "Name's Earl. This is my wife Linda. We've got food, medical supplies, and a safe place to rest. Lord knows you look like you need it." Marcus wanted to trust them. Wanted to believe that good people still existed. But Rachel's story, what he'd seen at the fire station, made him cautious. "Why help us?" he asked directly. Earl smiled, sad but genuine. "Because that's what people are supposed to do. Help each other. World went to hell, but that doesn't mean we have to. Come on in. Get cleaned up. Eat something. Then you can decide if you trust us or not. They took the chance. What choice did they have? Inside, the farm was like stepping back in time, before everything collapsed. Earl and Linda had been preppers, had their farms set up to be self-sufficient. They had other survivors there too, maybe 10 people total, all contributing, all working together. It was the kind of community Marcus had hoped to find at the fire station. The kind worth fighting for. As Marcus cleaned the blood from his hands and sat down to the first hot meal he'd had in weeks, he thought about everything that had happened. Thought about the people he'd lost, the things he'd done to survive, the choice he'd made to fight back instead of just running. The world had collapsed, civilization had fallen, and the dead walked the streets. But people were still here. Still fighting. Still caring. That had to count for something. Across the region, other survivors were settling into their own version of safety, however temporary. Brooklyn had found an office building with a secure parking garage and was setting up a new base. Tommy and the kids at Plymouth High were growing stronger, more organized, building something that might actually last. And all of them, in their own ways, were learning the same lesson: survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about staying human. The apocalypse had revealed the worst in people, sure. The raiders, the soldiers using survivors as experiments, the ones who'd given up their humanity to survive. But it had also revealed the best. The people who risked their lives to help strangers. The kids who built communities to protect each other. The old man who knew the city's secrets and used them to fight back. The rock climber who refused to quit even when everything seemed hopeless. Marcus stood on Earl's porch that night, looking out at the dark farmland, the stars brighter than he'd ever seen them without city lights. Calvin joined him, offering a can of beer they'd found in the cellar. "Hell of a day," Calvin said. Marcus nodded. "Hell of a life now." They drank in silence, two survivors who'd become friends in the span of a day, bound together by the simple fact that they'd both chosen to fight. "You think we can actually make it?" Marcus asked. "Build something that lasts?" Calvin considered the question seriously. "Honestly? I don't know. Odds aren't great. Dead ones everywhere. Bad people taking advantage. Resources running out. But you know what? We made it this far. Freed those people. Found this place. That's something. Maybe enough somethings add up to a future." Marcus liked that answer. Liked the idea that every small victory mattered, every person saved, every community built. The world had collapsed, but from the ruins, maybe they could build something better. Something worth surviving for. He raised his beer can in a toast. To enough somethings. Calvin clinked his can against Marcus's. To enough somethings. Inside the farmhouse, Rachel was telling her story to the others, sharing what she knew about the soldier camps and the experiments. Information that could save lives, could help other survivors avoid the same fate. Tommy was hundreds of miles away, but he was having similar conversations, the kids at the high school sharing intelligence about the armed groups searching the suburbs. Brooklyn was writing in a journal she'd found, documenting everything, creating a record of these days so that if humanity did survive, they'd remember what it cost. All across the collapsed remains of civilization, humans were doing what humans do best: adapting, surviving, fighting back against the darkness. The dead may have inherited the cities, and evil people may have taken advantage of the chaos, but the good ones were still out there. Still holding on. Still refusing to give up on each other or themselves. The untold stories of survival were being written in real time, each one a testament to the strength of the human spirit. As Marcus finally headed inside to get some sleep, he felt something he hadn't felt since that Tuesday morning when the world ended: hope. Real, genuine hope that tomorrow might actually come. That the fight was worth it. That survival meant more than just breathing. It meant living, connecting, building, and refusing to let the end of the world be the end of humanity. The zombie chaos would continue. The threats would keep coming. But so would the resistance. so would the stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough.